Chevron 1, encoded.
For my ally is the Force, and the powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow.
You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Cry hammer, and let's set the dogs of war.
Chevron 2, encoded.
Conan, what is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, to hear the lamentation of your women.
It's all in the reflexes.
I'll also say that you're heavy into martial arts, Tai Chi and all that killer stuff.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
Chevron 3, encoded.
And somebody ought to belt you in the mouth. But I won't. The hell I will.
Chevron 4, encoded.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Chevron 5, encoded.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Chevron 6, encoded.
That's why you can't, little boy.
Great Scott.
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
You shall not pass!
I thought I'd die fighting side by side with an ally.
What about side by side with a friend?
The day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day.
Chevron 7 is locked.
Howdy, all. Welcome back to another Saturday Night Drive-In, where we take a break from all the nonsense that we have to wade through on a daily basis, even a weekly basis, and we sit back and watch a movie and hopefully have a good time and hopefully have a good discussion about it. I'm joined... No.
Whenever you say discussion on this show, I'm like, oh, dear God, what is about to happen here?
No, nothing's going to happen. We're going to be fine here. We're going to be fine. My complaints today are very specific and not so much about the movie, but about certain portrayals in the movie and certain parts of the movie. But
I think I can predict some of those.
You know exactly what my major
I think I can
be.
see. Mm-hmm.
Everybody who knows
cringe.
Everybody who knows me knows my first major complaint. Anyway, but he's already spoken. I'm joined by we'll go with hetero life partner.
Hetero life partner.
Jed, the Hollywood Scholar. Jed, how are you?
I'm doing great. Everyone remember the 5th of November. It is great to be here to be talking about a movie that I only watched for the first time last November 5th. So we're coming up on a year since I watched it for the first time. And I'm excited to talk about it because I've never really had a discussion with someone about this movie, but I have a lot of thoughts about it. And I'm very fascinated by it. So I've been looking forward to this.
This is my second watching of it. I watched it. When did this come out?
In 2005.
Wow, yeah. So it's been over a decade since I watched this for the first time. And when I watched the first time, it was in passing. It was on TV, and I just watched it. I had no intention of watching it. It was just, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna give this a try. And I had forgotten because it wasn't a serious watch. Therefore, the way my crazy memory, it didn't stick. So I remember bits and pieces. And so it was essentially a fresh watch for when I watched it yesterday. And I have thoughts too. But anyway, so hail and howdy to the chat. We hope you guys enjoy this. Whether you're watching now or on the Reupload, hit that like button. We hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Okay, so Jed, V for Vendetta. Back in the day, this is a movie that kind of came out of nowhere. And this is during peak love for Hugo Weaving. Because he's coming off Lord of the Rings and Matrix. Everybody's in love with Hugo Weaving at this point. And there's also peak nerding out for Natalie Portman.
Of course, because Revenge of the Sith came out the same year, correct?
She's fresh off the prequels. The nerds love her. Not this nerd, though. Not this nerd. The nerds loved her. She became a new sexual icon for this stuff. And
Black Swan.
And yeah, so she went on to have her career and be a stupid everything. So this movie, though, again, it didn't so much fly under the radar, but it's not something anybody ever saw coming. At least that's what I remember. And then it caught fire, and now it's a cult classic. People generally adore this movie, and with good reason, because whatever our final thoughts on this movie may be, it is a poignant topic that is relevant today. The themes and messages that V for Vendetta covers are meaningful. Totalitarianism, authoritarianism, fascism, erasure of art, erasure of culture.
That's a big thing I want to talk about, is the art portrayed in this film.
It's all here. And
Well,
I question
and even other
tactics on it. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just real fast. Even in other ways that are more subtle than political or social, but even subtle ways, as Legatus already mentioned in the chat, everyone nowadays believes if it's a masked hero, they have to show their face. Hugo Weaving, the closest we get to his face is where he's wearing all that prosthetic makeup that I always look at him and think he looks like the villain from Men in Black 3. That's what I see every single time. It's like, where are his spikes, man? Where are his spikes?
When
but even
being,
subtle stuff like that.
What is it? Redcliffe or
Rookwood?
Rookwood, yeah.
When he's being Rookwood, I mean, he's still covered in a lot of prosthetics, so we can't, and shadow, and we can't really see his face.
I still see Hugo Weaving in there, though.
You still do, to a certain extent, but everyone these days, like with Din Djarin, is a perfect example. People are like, oh, we have to show the faces. Or even the Marvel movies, when during combat, everyone's just taking off their mask all the time. It's like, no, you might die. You're just a human under there, Ant-Man. Don't take off your protective mask.
It's one thing at the end of Avengers, during the final moments, where Captain America pulls off his own mask, or pulls it back because it was attached to his suit in that incarnation.
Well, he was injured. He was injured. There was blood.
And he's also Captain America.
Yeah.
He can take a punch.
Yeah. That isn't being protective at all. That's more presentation, and there's no need to present yourself well.
The Avengers movie version of his outfit, it was just fabric. It wasn't a helmet. Later on, when he's got the helmet back on, he leaves the helmet on. Because that's protecting him then. But that's a whole nother discussion for another time. All right, so Jed, walk us into V for Vendetta.
Okay, so V for Vendetta is a film that takes place in the near future after a totalitarian government has overtaken Great Britain. The United States is virtually wiped off the map. They call it a leper colony at the beginning. It's not relevant on the world stage anymore. And this society is corrupt. It's without culture, and whatever culture is allowed to exist still is carefully controlled, as we hear mention of a blacklist. And it's just about these two characters, Evie and V, who are fighting against this totalitarian government in different ways through an idea, in the case of V, that freedom is something that's worth more than your own life. And it's a very interesting story, especially with the resurgence of the true history of Guy Fawkes Day with the gunpowder plot. A lot of people that I'm familiar with have never heard of it outside of the context of this movie. If you haven't seen this movie in the modern day, you probably have no idea who Guy Fawkes is, what the gunpowder plot was. Even for the UK people that I know, it's not as relevant anymore. So it's interesting that they chose such a small piece of English history to be the focal point of this revolution that V begins with Guy Fawkes Day and the 5th of November.
Yeah, I think, and the Guy Fawkes mask, that is the symbol of this movie. That is what people relate to immediately. And as you brought it up, and Legatus brought up in the chat, Hugo Weaving is such a good actor that he doesn't need to take the mask off. He emotes with his diction. I mean, his introduction to Evie, when he's using the alliteration with V words, and his diction, his tone, his delivery, that's the emoting. You see, that's a lost
That's a
art
Shakespearean actor.
Yeah.
That technique he does, that's very much a theatrical actor, because as on the stage, your facial expressions aren't that essential because the audience is so far away. And so you have to focus on emoting within your voice. And that's exactly what they needed, is a theatrical actor. And Hugo Weaving, of course, like many other actors, has his background in theater. But this is, even Hugo Weaving talked about it, it felt very similar to a stage performance to him.
and he's doing a lot of physical
Mhm.
emoting without his face, a lot of hand gestures, a lot of body movement, and you can feel the anguish of V
Mhm.
at times when he's either made a choice or forced something, like with the whole torture sequence. You can feel the anguish, especially after Evie leaves and he roars in disgust with himself and throws his mask and breaks the mirror.
Mhm.
And still, as I said, wisely keeping him out of frame, keeping his face out of frame, because
Using immaculate cinematography to do
you
so.
don't need to see it. Not to mention what the closest you come is during the flashback sequence when you see V emerging from the fiery rubble covered in burn scars.
Mhm.
And you understand that that's a deformed individual physically under there. Once you know it, if you are, let's just say, a viewer who is experienced enough in this stuff and who likes to actually have the story play out then thrust in their face, that's all you need.
Mhm.
You don't need to see the gore, the disfigurement, because the movie does a really good job of showing that V's disfigurement isn't so much his burn, but his tortured soul, that he has been
Mhm.
driven to this point, that he's going to take such drastic actions and get people killed. Because listen, his call for revolution at the beginning of the movie when he takes over the TV studio, it's lights a fire on people, and it eventually gets somebody killed. Which, when the inspector's giving his monologue as we're transitioning from the time passing to November 4th, where the
Mhm.
little girl who clearly was inspired by V took her mask out early and went out and started spray painting and then gets shot by the finger. He got somebody innocent killed.
Yes.
And he knows he was going to incur that kind of thing. And that's why he's ready for his fate. And we'll talk about his fate at the end. I don't want to jump too
Mhm.
far ahead. But that's why I'll say this out. Hugo Weaving makes this movie.
Oh, 100%.
Hugo Weaving makes the movie. His portrayal of V, his depiction of it, his movement, his action, everything he does makes me. And I wish there was more of V. And I'm going to explain that because my one major detraction from this movie is Natalie Portman. She is my detraction from this movie because, one, I do not think she's a talented actress. I think she's very one note. And two, it boggles my mind how you have an entire movie filled with classic British character actors and you hire an American actress to be the British protagonist, to be the vessel through which we're supposed
Mhm.
to see these events through. That boggles my mind. I mean, I don't know the backstory about the hiring process, the casting process for
Mhm.
Evie, but how and why it's Natalie Portman boggles my mind, because hearing her fake British accent surrounded by actual British accents, it hurts my ears because I know it's forced.
Mhm.
I mean, am I wrong? Am I wrong?
I mean, she's definitely nowhere near on the level of Hugo Weaving. I don't mind her performance in several scenes. I actually quite love it, particularly the
Mhm.
scene after her torture when she's standing in the rain and it's framed very well against V being born of fire. She was reborn of water. Like, there's
That's
some
good
interest.
cinematography. That's just
It's
also good
but
cinematography right
it
there.
very, very good cinematography. But her face in that as well is emoting quite heavily. So she's definitely not as important of a
Okay.
piece to the movie as Hugo Weaving. But there are people
Yeah.
who could have done a much, much better
Yeah,
job
I'm
than
not.
her.
Listen, I'm not going to put her on the level of the plank emoteless morons we criticize in Disney
Oh,
Star Wars and
she's
MCU
no
today.
Morford Clark.
Yeah. She's no more Clark. She's not the chicks in the MCU movies. She's not
Mhm.
Bang's emo dark Jedi girl who they all want to be gay. But she's a mid-level actress. I've never found her compelling in anything I've seen her in. And even when she came on the screen, and I'm not a Fredo, so I wasn't into her in
Oh.
that movie with the French dude.
Yeah,
What is it?
that is so weird.
Yeah,
I
I'm
haven't
not.
seen the movie, but I know about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was never into that. So, and therefore, I've never been big to Natalie Portman. So, therefore, she's an automatic drain on me for a movie. I
Mhm.
mean, that's why, as much as I love the Thor trilogy. You notice I say trilogy.
Mhm.
I love the Thor trilogy in the MCU, or at least the two parts that she's in. she ruins those movies just a little bit for me because it's just somebody could be better. It could be better. And that's my largest negative point to this movie is Natalie Portman, because you could have there is a list of British actresses, young, attractive British actresses at the time who have power, who have agency, who have gravitas on a screen that could have done such a better job than her. And it's just that. I mean, she has her moments. And like you said, she sells the torture scene. She sells the whole moment of that. But the rest of it, just all I'm thinking is could be somebody better, could be something better. And I can't stop thinking that. And that's my subjectivity. And I know it because I am the subjective one on this show. So I'm allowed to say that. And it takes something away from me, which is that's the major loss of points for me in this movie, or is her performance and her existence in the movie as a whole. And also a little bit of Evie's character. I mean, V is very simple to understand. He's complicated yet simple, not a problem. But her early betrayal of him, I have a small problem with that. How do you feel about that?
I mean, it makes sense to me because since revolutions became a thing, humanity has been grappling with the moral way to overthrow an unjust system, with the American and French revolutions being very interesting comparisons.
Yeah.
So yes, she wanted to overthrow her government, but she probably hoped for something a little bit more similar to the American Revolution, at least in the way that the Continental Congress ran it versus the more extremists of the war. But V was very much the French revolutionary. And as someone who enjoys history, I really like that comparison of the philosophies. But early on in the movie, she, of course, is against the government. She's hated it ever since they took away her parents and even the influence that her parents had when the regime was first taken over. But V does come across as extreme. Even at the end of the movie, a lot of people would be hard-pressed to say that he was wholly in the right in everything that he did, because he did a lot of extreme things to the degree of near mass murder. But there is a degree of justification for it. Was it right? Was it wrong? And so someone who is just coming into it, seeing the violence and all that, I see it as completely plausible that she would be turned off by it and frightened and perhaps morally dubious about aligning herself with him.
The only way that I can kind of understand her early betrayals, because we know her backstory. She was sent to a re-education camp, which means she's a little programmed. She's a little brainwashed. And because she was, what, 5? Around
Something
5?
like that.
Like single digits, like definitely under 8 or 9. She's somewhere between 5 and 6, 4 and 6, 5 and 6, something like that. And so that means at a young mind, she's very impressionable, which means it's very easy for her to not to know something is wrong, but to be programmed to respond in a certain way. So when she helps him at the TV station, that's her instincts taking over. The instincts born of, I know that this is oppression, and I'm going to help this guy who helped me in the alleyway. But at the same time, then her response later on, I feel that's the programming taking over, that I shouldn't do this. That's how I don't like it, but that's how I don't like her behavior in that, because I feel it.
Well, she doesn't want to be party to murder. Yeah. I think it makes sense both from the programming angle, and if she goes through with helping V in that particular moment, she'd be an accomplice to murder. And murder is something extreme, even for someone who hates what their government is doing in a situation like her. So I see it as very justifiable, even though she knows he's a pedo, a map, because that's what she's pretending to be, is an underage girl in that scene. And God, the priest acting in that scene, it's hilarious, but in all the wrong ways. Like, it's so gross the way he talks to her. But it's perfect. It's perfect. But yeah, I see it as making sense. It is off-putting. It's like, come on, girl, you've seen this. You like. Also,
she's in that moment where you're with a degenerate. You're with a horrible human being, and that you kind of know that's somebody that deserves it. That deserves the wood chipper at that point, right there.
You'd think, but there's a little bit difference of condemning a man for his crimes and partaking in the execution of
I understand that. And so that early part, but again, the story gives me enough that I can understand it. I may not like it, but the story gives me enough to work with that I can understand the programming. And then Uh her I don't know how to put this. Her time with Gordon. I feel as though once she learns that all his secrets, again, the emphasis doesn't seem like it was enough. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
To me, I didn't get the sense that his revelations of his sexuality, of his collection of the art of stuff, I feel as though they didn't spend enough time showing us how much of an impact that had on her. Because then we jump right to the torture sequence, and it seems like that's almost forgotten.
I mean, she does talk about it. Like, she asks, "Hey, did he die?" He shows up in the final scene, but yeah, there is a lot going on, so it would have expanded out the runtime. But the point of his scenes already were aiding the scenes with V, where V was like had all this old artwork. V had the old Monte Cristo movie and stuff like that. This guy was adding to that perception of, that V had of the world, that art meant something. And so it more felt supplementary to me than needing to stand on its own. It would have been nice, of course, with a further runtime, but with the limits of runtime.
Well, I feel like the runtime is still a little long to begin with. I feel like this movie could have shaved 20 minutes off of it.
It's possible. I can definitely see a few.
It's the middle parts. It's the middle parts. Her time with V, and also her time during her walkabout, I guess, as I think about it, some of that stuff. I feel you could have shaved 10 minutes off here, 10 minutes off there, and gotten it just under 2 hours, and it would have felt a little tighter overall.
I could definitely agree. It just depends on what type of movie they were going for, because this isn't supposed to be an action movie. There's great action in it.
Yeah,
but a lot of those scenes that you're talking about really lend towards at least my immersion in this world of this drab feeling that existence has created, and the I don't know, just the dialogue. A lot of those scenes have some immaculate dialogue.
Yeah, well, see, the thing is, it's scenes without the dialogue. I feel certain scenes kept and certain scenes gotten rid of would have made it better. I don't know. I feel it's very hard to shape. I know it's hard in a movie where the cinematography is important, the scenery is important, the visuals are important, to find 20 minutes to maybe get it under that 2 hours. But I feel a good editor could have done that, and it would have been even tighter of a movie. That's just my feeling because I was at the hour and a half mark, and I'm thinking, okay, I know, because my memory is telling me we're getting near the end. Because even if I hadn't already seen this, which I had, because I did remember that the whole torture sequence, the capture sequence, I knew that was a facade. I knew it was a play the whole time, because one, I remember. Two, there are certain key elements. One, whenever you see somebody's hands, they always had the gloves on, even when delivering the food. And to me, that was the immediate tell that it was V. And you never see their face because it's V.
And he's wearing prosthetics. Like,
he's wearing prosthetics. Yeah, but I know it's him because early on in the movie they make a moment to let you know that Evie knows what his hands look like. So the minute I see gloves constantly, that was telling me, oh yes, I remember now. It's V the whole time. And while the interrogation scene, the torture scene is important. I mean, it's the pivotal point in Evie's character development.
Of course.
My one complaint in that is the choice of the author of the letter she finds. Now, call me simplistic. Some might say that. I think because the timing does match up, I think, of the incident where they were all being kept at the lab and having experiments done on them. If it had been from her mother instead of the gay chick.
I was like, the first time I watched this, I was already having problems with that because with the letter existing in the first place till I found out that V planted it there. That fixed all my issues with the scene once we got later into the movie. But it would have just been too
sappy.
Not too sappy. The coincidence would have been astronomical to have her parents go to the same camp as V, to be in the cell next to it. There's just a lot of dominoes, and I really have a problem with that. As you know,
see, for me, it would have not. I wouldn't see the coincidence. It would have been a great foundation of why V took an interest in her. That, to me, it would have been a great connection that would have made it
I always
deeper.
I always like the idea of it being a coincidence that they met, the inciting incident being a coincidence. Uh, I feel like that's way more impactful because he just happened to find this girl on his way to set off the initial bomb and connected with her, and she, just like anyone else in the world, she had issues with the government. Like she was just representative of the everyday person and how we can influence the everyday person. So if there was an additional reason why V went to look for her and she happened to be assaulted at the moment right before the bomb, it just creates a whole series of coincidences that I think degrades the whole idea of she's an everyday person. Everyone has problems with the government, and this is what V's influence can do to anyone because she's the audience's vehicle through all this. It's a very common trope, but she's also the everyday person in that world's vehicle. Everyone lives a life like her. Everyone is questioning. Everyone is living in fear, and everyone's been reprogrammed to a certain extent. But V showing her what art used to be like, what culture used to be like, what life could be like, what it used to be like, is what changed her. So I am a much bigger fan of the idea that she is just anybody. Anybody could play the role of Evie.
I see that. See, that's just me trying to make a deeper lore. That's just how my brain works. And that my brain went, I would have liked it if it had just had an even deeper connection. And another reason that they had been there and he found that, and that she's the one that ended up his vehicle for his vengeance. And that's just me writing it. That's, I mean, it's the way, I mean, the gay chick's not bad.
Oh, I really like that story, especially with the parallels between V and Evie's reaction to it.
I mean, it's a little schmaltzy for me, but it's schmaltzy being overly dramatic, overly I guess over dramatic works. I'm using Yiddish here. I shouldn't do that. But it's my only thing is that at one point, there's only one line in that bothered me. And it's like, why do they hate us so much? That's the only line that bothered me.
There are a few moments like that, like going out of their way to point out that the High Chancellor was a member of the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
There were a few things like that was like trying to tie it into modern day too much. Yeah. I don't think it matters what the High Chancellor's party is. Like, if they never said it, it doesn't matter. But there's extremists in every situation, so him being conservative doesn't necessarily bother me.
I wasn't even thinking that. I just mean the thing when by the time his parties evolved into whatever it is.
Yeah,
so why do they hate us so much?
Evolution.
I mean, this is 2005, like you said. Acceptance was at its all-time high at that point.
Right, that was in the future at that point. That flashback where she said, like, why do they hate us so much? That was 2017, I think.
Well, no, my point is it being written in 2005. Acceptance was at an all-time high in terms of sexuality.
Yes, in the real world, but this is an alternate future where things have changed, and they needed an other. That was something that this every totalitarian society needs, is an other, and having it being gay isn't.
So, sorry.
No. It's just it feels a little too applicable to modern 2023 stuff. But for 2005, I don't feel like it was too over the top. It could have been, especially with what we know what happened with the Wachowskis.
Yeah, that surprised me. I didn't know that the Wachowski brothers wrote that movie. But
it's okay to call them brothers, everyone. They were at the time.
Yeah. And I don't give a shit either way.
And I don't give a shit.
I don't care. But the implication of that camp was everybody gay? Were all the prisoners gay in that camp? And therefore
no. They specifically said it was a variety, like
I guess
foreigners, all like Muslims, just anyone who wasn't born and raised in England with English values.
Because as soon as I saw the chick from the letter, I realized, I saw her in that. So there's definitely not somebody there. This is a flashback. This isn't somebody who's reached through the wall and put it there. This is something this has happened already. And again, I don't dislike it. I just the dialogue of the story of her story sometimes that I have a little bit of problem with some of that. Also the delivery.
If it were framed in a different way, I would have less of an issue with it. But I actually agree with you. Is it doesn't feel like something a prisoner would write down on a piece of toilet paper.
Yeah.
It seems farcical. That's why I kind of wish that maybe V had been told this story through the wall and he had fabricated the note. The story was true, but the note itself was fabricated, and it was his romantic lens of it, his influence from the movies that he loved, making it seem all flowery and over the top and just portrayed in a very awkward manner. But I do agree with you, and I don't know of anyone who could take wet toilet paper, dry it out, and write a comprehensive letter on it.
Yeah, that so much told on so little.
Exactly.
That was my I was struggling to
it's strange credulity.
Yeah, thank you. That's what. Yeah,
but it would have, at least in my opinion, resolved itself if, of course, the story needed to be true. The influence it had on V and Evie is important, but having V fabricate the note itself, I think, would have worked. And like I said a minute ago, has justifications with how he sees the world, because once he got out of there, his only view of the world was through.
And it would also work with his character, because he goes over the top. He will
100%.
do whatever he needs to do to achieve his goal. And even though he's disgusted with himself by doing it.
Yes.
So I get, like I said, that is the only point on the whole torture sequence that I have it's not a problem. I just, again, I used the word tighter. Could have been tighter, could have been cleaner. And I understand your other comment that it's a good expression of the other that a totalitarian, authoritarian government needs to use as scapegoatism.
Yeah.
I think
I have different feelings about this movie. It came out.
Yeah. We're just hypersensitive to that stuff right now.
Of course.
And when it happened, I had to remind myself, Adam, this was made over a decade ago. It isn't this. It's not current day. It's not trying to hammer that message. Just remember that. That's the problem, though. I had to tell myself that. And that's a problem.
I agree.
I shouldn't have to do that. I mean, I don't do that for anything that was made in the 90s or the 80s or anything before that for the previous century. But anything made after 2000, I have to ask that question, and that bothers me, because it doesn't take away from whatever enjoyment I got out of this movie, but it mentally disturbs me that that I'm now wired this way to question something when, as you said, you laid it out perfectly. It was simply the choice of the other that the authoritarian government is using as the scapegoat for their problems. So, yeah. All right. So, overall, the movie flows pretty well. Flows pretty well. And like I said, it slows down a little for me during the months that we take to get from Evie's release from V's captivity when she is free of her fear. It slows down a little bit for me there, but the finale is done well, because I like the way that V says, I'm not the hero to make this decision because of what I've done. Originally I was ready to, but you've evolved my thought process on this. That you are, to your point, Jed, she is the everyday man that needs to decide, do you want this revolution to happen?
Oh, he's an outsider at this point. As much as he's been hurt by this government, he's so detached from it. He doesn't live in it. He doesn't walk with these people. He doesn't live the life of these people. So
he doesn't even remember who he is prior to experiments.
Yeah, he has no identity outside of the mask. Yeah. And that's why it's even more important that we don't see him behind the mask, because he doesn't see himself behind the mask. He's not someone behind there, really. And so, yeah, I love that idea of someone who's like, yes, I set this up for you, but ultimately it doesn't affect me. I'm going to die either way. This is the world that I've built for you. Do you want to push the final button? Do you want to actually let it be created? Do you want to be the progenitor of a world where there's hope again?
Yeah.
And I think it works really well, because even Doctor Who does that sometimes. There's a few times in the Capaldi era where he talks about, this isn't my choice. It's not my world. I can't be the one to make these choices. Yeah. And I love that. And I love the trope as much as it is.
And it works.
It 100% works. And then adding in with, like how you mentioned before, he hates what he's become. The good man who sacrifices his soul for the good of the everyone else. That's what V is. He's ashamed of what he does, but he knows it's necessary.
And that's why, while I enjoy V as our other protagonist, that's why I'm not so attached to him that I feel bad that he died.
You shouldn't feel bad that he dies. No.
I'm perfectly okay with him dying because he needs to die, because he is he would be a remnant of that previous world, of all the hate and anger. And his death is necessary. And it's done well. And again, sometimes you get attached to a hero and like, no, don't die. No. It's okay. It's okay. You die. It's perfectly fine. Because you went out also in badass fashion.
Very badass. That scene was great. But not to tie it to Doctor Who too many times during this, but again, in the Capaldi era, there's the Zygon invasion, if you remember, from season 9, where he's talking with the Zygon.
One of his best speeches. One of Capaldi's best Doctor speeches.
Incredible speech. But in part of the speech, he turns to the Zygon who incited this revolution and said, when the revolution's over, when you've made everything perfect and everything's running smoothly,
who's the next one?
What do you do with people like you, the troublemakers? We'll win. And she just said, nobody wins for long. And I love that, because that's what V would represent, is just like the Doctor said. What do you do with people like V when the world is back to normalcy? Because V can't live in 2005 England. He can't exist then. No. What would he be? What use, what purpose would he serve? The idea was what was needed, and it lives on after him.
Yeah.
But it's...
And at the same time, I like it that he understood that. I like that he knows I need to go. And even when Evie's offering him, no, let's just run away together because I've fallen in love with you, and that's a whole nother discussion to have. I like that he says, no, you don't want this. I'm damaged, and you have a chance to free yourself completely and be a part of this. And his acceptance is what makes him a good character in the end.
Oh, 100%. And I love how we don't see the new world. The new world isn't important.
Yeah. What I wanted to see, though, I would have liked a little more world building of the rest of the world. We know that America's war ruined this and that, but I would have liked to just 2 minutes of the state of the rest of the world.
Yeah. More world building would have been nice. It could have been a situation like, it's kind of cliche, but in a lot of dystopians, they are small pockets and the rest of the world is going fine because of the misinformation of the news.
And this is a definite misinformation society. And what I like about it is halfway through the movie, when they're trying to cover up everything that V's doing, the people are going, yeah, fuck this. I don't believe what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, they went too hard, too fast.
Yeah.
But something I wanted to briefly get on, like I mentioned earlier, V represents the French Revolution ideals, but only within himself. He causes a lot of violence, but because of his decisions and because of the violence he incurs, no one else has to be violent.
Yeah. That's a great point.
It is a bloodless revolution with the exception of V, because he said, hey, I'm going to blow up Parliament. It's shown that they evacuate it. Most likely, not too many people get hurt or die in that explosion. And the Guy Fawkes people, they just have to walk, and the military stands down and joins them.
That's a fantastic moment, because here you have that whole buildup. We have that whole situation of the final act where V takes out MacReady. He takes out John Hurt. Well, MacReady takes out John Hurt.
Yeah.
And you gotta love John Hurt in this movie.
Oh, John Hurt was incredible.
And that was
2 John Hurt movies in 1 month.
Yeah. I knew you'd catch on to that one. But yeah, so John Hurt was incredible. I mean, being his presence on the giant screen the entire time is the imposing authoritarian, and the only other 2 times we see him is when he breaks the glass of milk during the during the satire moment.
I don't know how that one got made. I gotta briefly say, how the hell did that get filmed and then broadcast?
They did it fast and dirty. They kept the censors out. That's my deal.
It's impressive that he pulled it off. But.
And then the only time we see him in the flesh, he's on his knees begging for his life, because that's what's what all authoritarian leaders are. They're without the power that protects them, without the cloak and the threatening forces that are their hammer, they're powerless and they're weak. And then the successor is just as weak and stupid because McCready gets his in satisfying fashion moments after. But what I love about the whole thing is, like you said, it's a bloodless revolution. V did all the dirty work, and he left it to everybody else to choose to not be violent. And I appreciate that. And then once the corrupt leadership is out of the situation, once they're all dead, once Hurt is dead, John Hurt's character is dead, once McCready is dead, Sattler, was his name Sattler? Was that John Hurt's character? Sattler?
I think so, something like that.
Once the heads of the party are dead and the military is faced with the choice, we're not hearing anything from command. These people are walking towards us. What do we do? What do we do? When left to their own devices, they resort to the human reaction: stand down. They're just walking. They're not threatening. They're simply walking. We cannot mow these people down in good conscience. And then they choose peace. I mean, Evie pulls the lever for a moment of violence, but like you said, it's a violence against an inanimate object.
Yeah, it's a symbol.
It's a symbolistic move. And so all the violence was contained to 3 individuals and the guards protecting them or involved in that. And in the process, V had taken out everybody else that was lending to the violence through his vendetta actions, his terminal list, for lack of a better phrase. And when left to the people and to remaining powers who are still the people, like the inspector, the generals, the military, they chose peace. They chose not to hurt each other. And that's a powerful moment to conclude on. And and then just leave it open and think, okay, now what are they going to do? Sorry, movie over. You don't get to know.
No, and I don't think it's necessary. Like it's portrayed in such a way that it's most likely a positive end. But as cheesy it is, like I feel like a lot of people will perceive it as cheesy. I even can my logical brain's like, I should react to this like this cheesy, but I can't react that way. Where all the people who've died throughout the film take off their masks too, as if they were participating, standing.
I thought that it was a little over the top to have the dead people show up. That was a little over the top for me. That's
what I mean. Like I could see it being very cheesy for people, but I really enjoyed it because
it was over the top.
It's symbolic. Like obviously they're not there.
Yeah, I know, but I would have preferred to have seen just the people we had seen in the intermittent scenes, the regular Joes at the bar and the homes, just them, not all the people that were dead. I just say take them out of it.
Yeah.
That made it a little dumb for me. I'll just say that part was dumb for me. I didn't because I'm like, wait, that little girl died. She's the one she was the stupid incident that incites everything that the inspector was worried about. And I didn't need to see her. I didn't need to see the gay couple. I didn't need to see her parents. I didn't need to see Gordon. I didn't need to see that.
I totally get it. It works for me, but I 100% see why it wouldn't for a lot of people.
And I see why it works for you. I mean, that's just it. It can work or it can't. It doesn't destroy the movie. It doesn't ruin it. But to me, it felt unnecessary to me because we had enough of the remaining familiar faces we had seen throughout the whole movie. It would have been more powerful to see just the parents of the dead girl and not the dead girl. To me, that would be a more powerful impact.
Perhaps.
Than having her there. Because
for me, the most powerful person we saw take off the mask, the most response was the inspector's partner. That one meant a lot to me. That's the one that felt important.
That's somebody that got turned throughout this whole thing because he's kind of just he's there. He's helping the inspector who is struggling with realizing that he's on to something, that he is on the point of understanding that the corruption cannot go on. He's aware of the corruption. He participates in the corruption. He's not happy about it, but he said, I'm a cop. I have to find answers at one point. That's the common cop portrayal character in a lot of things. I need to get the answers. I need to get the truth.
And it was essential that he did that.
Yeah. And that moment between him and Evie is it. She is the voice of the people. He represents the voice of the government. And if he hasn't been convinced at that point, then there's no hope for anybody.
No.
And that's why it's an important confrontation, because he is the one that knows it's bad. He's gone along to get along. And if he can break free, that means there's hope for everybody to understand things have to change. And again, that's the movie does a great job in constructing and putting this all together. And it delivers it well, on top of, as we said earlier, fantastic cinematography throughout the whole movie. Well-laid moments of flashback to present, great emphasis on certain moments. I mean, V's primal yell as he emerges from the fire, that's a great thing to represent his death and rebirth, the death of what he was and reborn into this hate-filled, vengeful creature that he becomes, that is a necessary evil. Because that's a perfect use of that word, I think. V is a necessary evil for all this,
100%.
a necessary catalyst. And everything. Now, again, I have just one thing during that is, I understand that Evie keeping her shaved head for 7 months helps her to not be recognized, but I don't like bald women.
I think it was helping keep her unrecognizable, but I think it was symbolic for herself as well. Like, she needed to feel like she was a different person as much as anything. And I mean, she does not pull off bald. She doesn't. But I think it is important to the movie. Like, that's my favorite shot or scene of the movie, where she's in the rain and just basking in it, and then it's mirrored with V in the fire, both of them reborn in different ways. And we mentioned a few times in the movie, harps on us a lot, especially with that torture scene and the conversations V and Evie have post the torture scene. But this film is a lot about fear. They talk about fear a lot, whether it's fear for the government or, like you mentioned earlier, when we saw the High Chancellor for the first time, really, he was afraid. The man who weaponized fear was concealing his own fear. The soldiers who, they were afraid of their superiors, but at the moment when they had to make the decision, they reverted back to an everyday person. There's just a lot of emphasis on the way that fear can be weaponized and used. And so Evie needed to lose her fear to present the best form of humanity going forward. And I really think it's an interesting dissection of a human emotion. Like, those don't come around a lot, but when they do, 9 times out of 10, they're cliche, they're surface level, and it's just like, yes, we've heard you say the word, I don't know, greed 1,700 times in this movie. We get it. But I think this one was like the right amount of subtle, right amount there for us. It's not the pivotal part of the story, obviously, but it's interesting to me, seeing how different people react to fear.
All right, last thing I want to talk about is, you brought it up earlier, the erasure of culture in this as such a theme, because you can look at totalitarianism around the world in actual history. The first thing they do is erase culture, burn books, destroy art, keep the art for themselves so that no one else can see it, so they can appreciate it. But you can't have that powerful imagery or those powerful words inspiring people to think beyond what you're telling them to think. And I do like that parallel to hit to real world history, because that's the truth. And because a people, for lack of a better term, people die, and I don't mean the physical death. I mean the death of the soul. People die; they lose themselves when they no longer have that respect for their culture and where they came from, and that's why I hate the term cultural appropriation, because real culture, real art is meant to be shared with everybody, no matter what you look like. And that's why that's why I said I'd like to have more time with Gordon's section of that, because Gordon's cache, we shall say, we'll call it his cache of culture. It was a true, and I don't use this word ironically, a true diverse collection of culture, whether you agree with what it meant or not. His point, you're not, when she sees a very large, ornate version of the Quran, you're not Muslim, are you? No, but that doesn't mean I can't appreciate its artistic value, essentially.
I love that line.
And that's the point. We're not necessarily talking about what something is saying, but sometimes you can appreciate its physical beauty. or at least what it means as something that represents thought and will make you think and make you have a discussion and a debate. And in that case, it would be a spiritual debate, Quran versus the Bible versus the Torah versus all kind of stuff. And I appreciate that the movie does that, especially like Gordon saying, where it's a vast collection of things. And he even had Nazi propaganda.
He did
on there.
And that's something that's important with censorship these days is, yes, there are terrible things from our past. There are bad parts of culture, but erasing it so people can't learn from them is just as detrimental as removing the positives. Just like you said with the Yahtzee flag is history. The fundamental reason people learn history is so that history doesn't repeat itself to the best of our abilities. And without history, without the culture that portrays that becomes a problem. And so that's why I think it's so impactful. And not to get too high-minded or self-aggrandizing or anything, but on a much, much smaller scale, I think that's what we're doing, is we're trying to preserve culture. Yes, obviously nowhere near on the same scale. I'm not trying to compare myself to Gordon or any of the others. But to a certain extent, that's why I think what we do is important, why we highlight what was good and point out what was bad and not allow censorship to change old movies, to change the past. Because even if Blazing Saddles is racist, it still is important to see and embrace what the world was at that time and see value in it as much as anything else. And so I'm not trying to act like I'm important or anything,
but you're right. Important. We are trying to collect, protect, and preserve things as they were originally presented, as they were originally created, delivered. And in some cases, the creators aren't here anymore, or the creators gave up their control and things have gone out of control, that they're off the rails, and it's disgusting and it's terrible. But it is our job, and we have a right as the people who, like myself, because I am older, I'm old man here. I was there when I was there when these things premiered. I stood in line, or I was brought to stand in line in the case of the original Star Wars movies. I was put on that. I was given this stuff to love and this. But I was there for so much more after that. And I remember what it was like when it first existed. And to be told by some less than 20-something, not even a 20-something, a less than 20-something these days, that the Disney-fied version or the new version that has been corrupted within a company, whoever buys that's the better version, that the old version needs to be modernized for a current day audience. No, go F yourself. No, it's an argument I made earlier last month in a video I made. Things are timeless for a reason. Art is timeless. It belongs to everybody. It's supposed to inspire you. It's supposed to give you hope. It's supposed to make you feel safe and comfortable. It's supposed to ground you. Some people will find things that are so beautiful, whether it be a piece of art or a piece of music, a book, that they will go to it in their darkest moment to find the peace to go on. They'll look at something and say, wow, that's just beautiful. And if something that beautiful can be created once, then maybe it's okay for me to struggle on to the next day. Maybe I can do something. Maybe I can show this to somebody else and give them hope. Maybe they'll find the beauty in it too. And that's the importance of culture. And that's why culture erasure is horrible. And it's the same thing, and it relates to what you said. We are in a modern day now, in 2023, when you and I are doing this review, we're seeing a new version of culture erasure. They're not erasing the culture, they're perverting it. And I don't say perverting it in a sexual manner. I mean, they are distorting it. They're changing it by saying, got to add pronouns, by saying so-and-so has to be changed this. They have to change the dialogue, got to update it. We're going to change the meaning of it here away from the meaning of what it originally had to suit the crazy people now to make them feel comfortable. That's erasing what came before. And that's not right. And that's why we are guardians of this culture that we now live in, of modern pop culture, because we're either there first, or like you, somebody who's come along and found it in its original form and appreciates what it was and sees that, yeah, you know what, I'm going to learn all I can about this so that when I share it with somebody else, I can give them the accurate representation if they haven't seen it before. It's our job to carry it on to the next generation. And that's why what we do is important. And that's why I don't think you are aggrandizing us at all. We're simply doing the job that has to be done. And whether we get praise for it now, I don't care. If what I do now, if the videos I make now, everything I do now survives into the years beyond me, and I want that to be after I've died at 350 years old.
So next week.
Shut up. I want everything I've done to preserve real Star Wars for people out there to see that this is what it looked like before Disney got their hands on it. If even a handful of people see that and they're able to get their hands on it and share with somebody else, I win. That means Disney doesn't win because, as I like to say always, we were here first. Real fans were here first, and we're going to collect, protect, and preserve this stuff. All right, I'm done. I'm done soapboxing.
Hey, it was a great soapbox, and I agree 100%. That's why we're here. That's why this has value. Every one of us, whether or not they're a part of the culture war or just some normie or anybody, can point to at least a point in their lives where something culturally, whether or not it be movies, television show, art, or something like that, any piece of art, a book, anything, has had an impact on our lives, even if it's in a small way. Sometimes we just need a distraction. Escapism in that form, it has value in and of itself, or the more thought-provoking escapism, there's just value to be had in all forms of art, and every single human being alive who isn't in a totalitarian situation like this movie presents can point to at least one time something like that has had impact. That's why I don't get the people who write off the culture as meaningless or unimportant. Like I got accused this week for a Doctor Who video of not being able to tell fiction from reality because I don't like modern Doctor Who. Well, obviously we can tell the difference. None of us are insane.
No.
The people who are fighting for culture, we don't think, oh my God, the TARDIS is going to show up and the Doctor's going to come out and I could go down on the diamond spikes. No, none of us think that. But we got value out of these stories, and if we fight for them, and if enough people speak, just like, you know, the Guy Fawkes mask-wearing crowd at the end of this movie, maybe good Doctor Who can come back, and I can have more moments like that where it's had a positive influence on me, and the next generation can enjoy what I've loved so much.
And we find value in it. You're right. We find value in it, and we appreciate it, but we don't lose our minds over it. We don't cry. We don't talk about constantly crying about this stuff, and that's the difference. That's the difference. And I'm going to leave it at that. As for the soundtrack, as we always like to go in, traditional classical pieces are all throughout this. It's scenic score. It's there for the moment.
And I think the choice for classical works just like the art. It is important. It is a old piece of culture that V was trying to portray, and it lends towards the overall themes of the movie. So yeah, I agree that the music isn't anything standout, but when they do use classical music, it does help
that's
a
the
lot
reason.
for me.
It's not meant to have an original score that's supposed to let us know what every scene looks like. It's there to punctuate the moment.
100%.
All right. Therefore, we're at that time. Score it up, Jed. It's your week, so you get to go first.
All right, so as much as I adore this film, just because of how much it makes me think, I love movies that make me think, even if I don't come to the same conclusions as the movies. That they're one of my favorite pieces of entertainment, is ones that make me think, and it's my favorite form of escapism. But I do realize, just like Adam said, there are major flaws in this movie. There are coincidences. Like, how do you justify a woman, a prisoner who's getting tortured, taking a wet piece of toilet paper and writing out her life story? Pages worth of stuff.
What did she use to write with?
I don't know. Like, that's all insane. So a little change would have helped a long way. But there are other examples of that where I think it does damage to the movie a lot. So as much as I want to give this like a 9 or 9.5, I probably have to bring it all the way down to an 8.5. I know that's not a whole lot, but
that's good for you though.
That is very good for me. That is very good for me.
Yeah.
But I do think a lot of the character work and theming, especially the theming, is strong. As much as some of the stuff like Legata said, the changes from just simple fascism versus anarchy to the more applicable neo-conservative versus liberalism is cringe and feels inserted and forced.
I noticed
it. Still works. I noticed it as well. It still works, but it's unnecessary. It doesn't matter what the origins of these people's political opinions were before the totalitarian society. it could have been anyone. Totalitarianism comes from anywhere. So
Yeah,
it is a little
both
cringe.
sides.
But...
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. I'm going to give this 7.5. My reasons: number one, my distaste for Natalie Portman. It takes me out of the movie. Her portrayal is average at best. She has a couple good moments. The best moments come from the torture scene, but everything else, like I said earlier, an American actress surrounded by talented British actors and actresses, you lose me. You could have gone better. Again, and then it's a lot of little things. Little more world building. I would have liked to, I mentioned earlier, outside world. Give me a little more texture to the world. I want a little more texture than just England. I want to know the full situation. The contrivances, you talked about those. You could get around it. And then, like I said, I have a problem here and there with a couple of behavioral moments, but the movie does explain them and allows me to understand them, even though I have a problem with it. But still, they do kind of bug me. In the end, though, like I say, 7.5, it's a worthy movie. Its cultural messages are massively important, especially right now, as we just talked about. And it's worth a watch. I don't know if I'll necessarily ever put it on my shelf, but I wouldn't never not watch this movie if it was on, or somebody wants to watch a movie. It's not something I would avoid watching, if that is a fair enough assessment. It's not something that needs to go in the void after just seeing it once. It's a movie worth watching. It's a movie worth rewatching. It's a movie worth sharing with other people, because you get a good discussion like this if you want to have that discussion, if you're willing to have the discussion and not put it rooted in ideological perspectives. Understand that it, like you just said, both sides can go completely awry. And that's what you need to remember. All right. So that leaves us for next week. I have chosen our movie next week, Jed. I haven't told Jed yet. I want to be your surprise. We've been serious. We've been serious for the past couple of weeks now. Time for a little levity.
Don't be Eddie Murphy.
No. I my next Eddie Murphy I was saving for February, for Black History Month.
Ooh. Coming
right,
to
I'll
America?
tell you now, yeah, I was good coming to America in February. We're going to coming to America.
I'm all right with that.
Yeah, I'm saying now. It's just a spit in the eye of everybody who yells at us. But next week, bomp.
Hey, yeah, baby.
Ferris
Love
Bueller's
that
Day
movie.
Off. Ferris Bueller's Day Off next week. We need a little levity. We need a little fun. We need a little movie that just is just kind of what the fuck.
I love it. Hot take, I think it's the only great John Hughes movie. I know that's very
no,
hot.
I'm okay with that. I'm not a massive John Hughes fan. I have problems with most of his movies that it's just like...
people would kill me for The Breakfast Club alone.
Screw The Breakfast Club.
Thank you.
I'm so tired of that movie.
It's so pretentious.
I'm so tired of that movie. It bores the hell out of me.
I will watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off every day for the rest of my life, but I'm happy never watching Breakfast Club again.
Yeah. 16 Candles. You can keep that too. You can keep them all.
And not another teen movie is okay.
Anyway, so next week, Ferris Bueller's Day Off will be right back here. We do that. So once again, chat, we thank you. Remember, if you watch this live or on the replay, remember to hit that like button if you had a good time. Otherwise, what are you doing here? That's all right, guys. Check out Jed's links description below, my links description below. I said that really quickly. It sounded weird. Thanks, guys. We'll catch you next week. Take it easy.
Chevron 1, loaded.
For my ally is the Force, and the powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow.
You failed your hunt. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Cry hammer, and let's set the tongues of war.
Chevron 2 is loaded.
Conan, what is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, to hear the lamentation of your women.
Song reflexes.
Well, I'll also say that you're heavy into martial arts, Tai Chi and all that killer stuff.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
Chevron 3 encoded.
And somebody ought to belt you in the mouth. But I won't. The hell I will.
Chevron 4 encoded.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Chevron 5 encoded.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Chevron 6 encoded.
That's the line you can, lump boy.
Great Scott! Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
You shall not pass!
I thought I'd die fighting side by side with Alpha.
What about side by side with a friend?
A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day.
Chevron 7 is locked.
Thanks for watching, everybody. If you'd like to reach out to me, please email me at theranernerd@gmail.com for all channel business purposes. I am on Twitter now, mostly for promotion and sharing of videos, maybe a little shit stirring here and there, who knows, at @theranernerd. You can also find me at the Geeks and Gamers forums under @Roas, and you can see me on Rumble and Odyssey under the Renaissance Nerd. Thanks again for watching. Take it easy.